Recording. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so good evening. This is the January 25th, 2022 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of New Canaan, Connecticut. This is a Zoom-only meeting. Lynn, if you can quickly tell everyone how you as the planner will be running the meeting, please.
Okay, this is a Zoom meeting, and firstly, everyone's video is shut off unless you're a P&Z member or you are actually presenting to the P&Z. And then we will take, when we take public comment, we'll take it via Zoom, obviously. And if you could just raise your little icon hand to let us know that you want to speak when the appropriate item comes up.
Okay, super. Thank you. Anyone, if there's anyone here for 255 South Avenue, that application has been withdrawn. If there's anyone here for 190 Brushy Ridge Road, that will not be open tonight. We expect that to be open at our February 22nd meeting. I'd like to welcome John Engel to the commission. John, we all know you as the big cheese on town council, but you also have a zoning background. Why don't you tell us real quick about that background?
I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 7 years under Carol Yaniselli. And I thought we had it was a great experience, and that's what caused me to want to come back.
Great. Well, welcome to the commission. I would like to thank Phil Williams for his service to the commission as a key business owner within town. He was of great service to the commission. Thank you, Phil. Roll call. John Goodwin, I am here. John Chris.
Present.
Krista Nielsen.
Here.
Dan Radman.
Here.
Claire Tiscornia.
Here.
Kent Turner.
Here.
Dick Ward. Do we have Dick yet?
No, we don't.
Okay. John Engel.
Here.
Arthur Cassavant.
Here.
Chris Herring.
Here.
James Bash.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Bash, you are seated for Mr. Ward. I will now, for our organizational meeting, introduce the first selectman, Mr. Moynihan. Kevin?
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Happy New Year. I will conduct your officer election, and then I will depart and be back on in about an hour after another meeting. So first I would call for nominations for chairman.
Well, may I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Just to be clear, James is seated for the meeting, but not for the organizational meeting, right? Because only regular members can participate in the organizational meeting.
Okay.
Is that true?
Kevin, is that correct?
I don't know whether that's correct, but Lynn must know. So,
Yes, I've consulted with town attorneys on this.
okay,
Okay.
good to know. Starting over, I would first of all call for nominations for chairman.
Nominate John Goodwin.
Second it.
Kent seconds. Any further nominations for chairman? Hearing none, all in favor by raising your hands for John Goodwin for chairman. That looks like it's unanimous. Actually, James is voting anyway.
I'm totally confused. Whichever way you want to go, I raise my hand.
Well, at least it wasn't a thumbs down.
James, you're supposed to pay attention. Anyway, thank you. And now I'll call for nominations for secretary.
I'd like to nominate Krista Nielsen for secretary.
Okay, second.
Second.
Who's that? Claire said second?
Yes.
Any further nominations for secretary? Hearing none, all in favor by raising your hands, except James. That looks like it's unanimous as well. That was unanimous? Thank you. And with that, I'll give you back your meeting. And thank you, Jen. I want to thank you all for your service. This is a great body. It's you're the hardest working. I always say the hardest working commission we have. Anyway, thank you for your service to the town. I'll be back. I'll be back, and I especially like to, be present for your cell phone discussion, because we had many of you know or may have watched last night. We had an information session last night, and I'd be curious to. I'll listen to your discussion. I may contribute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. First Selectman.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bill.
item number one, regular meeting, welcome signage, Tiger Man Public Works, one sign off exit 36 south of the Merritt Parkway at Old Stamford Road. Mr. Mann.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to share my screen, if that's okay. Everybody see that? So this is kind of a similar to what we had done 5-7 years ago, at least at exit 37 and 38. We had put in welcome signage at those two locations. They were very well received, and we'd like to do it now on this third location. Originally we had a delay with the DOT as to where exactly to place it. And we finally went forward with the original consideration that we liked. We put in an encroachment permit. Now we're here to ask for your blessing, and then we'll hopefully get a blessing from the DOT as well. This is the sign at exit 37 to Curtis Road. It doesn't have the plantings on it. This is when it was first installed, but the Beautification League plans to do the exact same thing and beautify both this area as well, similar to what they do at exit 37 and 38. This is the location itself. So as you're heading from into town, say from north to south, Merritt Parkway is at the bottom of the screen. You're heading northbound on Old Stamford Road. It'll be just to the left, just on the exit 36 southbound at the outside of the Gore area. For us, it was the best location. Inside the Gore area, we'd have to have a double face sign on the opposite side of the street, have problems with snow splatter. This seemed to be out of the way and an area where we could necessarily, where everyone could view the sign and enjoy it. This is a view of the intersection itself, and where you see that white sign with the yellow border at the top, right here, this is where we're planning on installing it. So as you're coming into town, it should be right there and very prominent for you. We did consider this location, but then again, we were looking at the fact that we were going to get snow splatter from the plows, and the might get damaged over time, the sign itself. The sign itself is 54 inches tall, 3'6" for the sign itself, and 6 feet wide. And then again, it's the red with the gold lettering and the gold finials that was decided upon by the selectmen. Rob Malazzi and Nick Williams fought over the settled in 1731, but this is what we would like to use again. So we're similar to all the other two locations. I don't know if you have any other questions, but that's our thought.
Any questions for Mr. Mann? No, sounds like we're good.
That was easy.
Yeah, exactly. Linda, we need a vote on this?
You should, I don't think you do, but I would take a vote.
Okay,
Last time it was like a thumbs up, say yes, thank you very much. We approve of the installation or the location or both.
okay. Well, we'll do a vote, make it real quick. Do I have a motion for approval?
This is Ms. Nielsen. I move for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay.
Who
I'll call-
seconded?
James Bash.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I call the,
Tiger, can you unshare? So
Yep, sorry, Lynn.
okay.
okay, I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. Mr. Chris? Okay, Mrs. Nielsen,
Yes.
Mr. Radman,
Yes.
Mrs. Siscornia,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Cassavant,
Yes.
Mr. Bash.
Yes.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Item number 2, 824, review upon application of the town of New Canaan for various sidewalk installations in town. Mr. Mann, is this you as well?
This is me.
Okay,
I'll have to share my screen again. Everyone see that?
we can see it.
Okay. So we were here a month or two ago for other locations in town. Now we've got, we're looking for a couple different locations and for planning for the future. So I'll run you through locations themselves. As you're aware, 8-24 municipal improvements. No municipal agency shall locate, accept, abandon, widen, narrow, or extend any street, bridge, parkway, or other public way without, until the proposal to take such action has been referred to the commission for a report. So that's what we'd like to do. Our first location is on Old Stanford Road. It's from Park Street to Bristow Park. I apologize, this is already under design. I apologize, I didn't bring it forward when we brought the others. I actually thought I had when we brought Park Street to you, but then when I looked at it, we had actually stopped at the intersection. This is about a 500-foot section, and we plan to have it on the north side of the road from Park Street right to the entrance to Bristow Park. The next section is actually an extension of that sidewalk. This just got recently approved with ARPA funds through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and Town Council. And this would extend from Bristow Park down Old Stanford Road to Gower Road here. It's about 1,900 feet long. At present, we're looking at the north and west side of the road, but we might be asked by the DOT or some residents to look at the south and east sides of the roads as well. So when this goes through under design, we've actually asked the engineer to give us a look and possibly give us an alignment on both sides of the street. It comes under DOT purview. So we've got to satisfy their requirements, and one of the requirements might that it be on the inside of the curve instead of the outside of the curve. The next section is on Lakeview Avenue. It's from Main Street to Millport Avenue. It's actually a connection. We have sidewalk on Millport Avenue leading from, on Lakeview from Millport to Route 123 and then to the school on Littlebrook. This is one stretch that we don't have. We have a stretch on Millport Avenue as well, down through Mill Pond and then all the way across Millport to Main Street. This is the one stretch that we do not have in town. It's about 1,100 feet long. And at present, we're looking at the north or south side of the road to see the alignment. Our preferred side is the north side. We'll take a look and see exactly what we can come forward with. But we seem to have much more right of way and some additional pavement on the north-hand side. And it seems like it would be an easier fit. The Millport apartments are here. There's another set of condos here. It seems to fit nicely on the north side of the road. And then the last stretch is on Parade Hill Road. This is a segment. We will be looking to try and extend it at a future date, but this is the sidewalk here comes down 4th Street and ends somewhere in this general vicinity right across from the area where we do our wildflower planting. We'd like to place it from here up to Rural Drive, the north end of Rural Drive, I should say the northern entrance or intersection with Rural Drive. It'll be on the south and west side of the road. It's about 1,650 feet long. If we take a look at the POCD in 2014, this is the pedestrian map in the Plan of Conservation and Development, and the section states to expand the sidewalk network in and near downtown. If we look at the 4 sections that we were asking for, this is Park Street. This is the intersection with 106. The first section was right here to Bristow Park. The second section was down to Gower Road. And then we'll look later at this possibility. We'd like to see what the user, how much use we get through this section before we decide to extend it for that last piece. The next section that we looked at or we were requesting for is Lakeview Avenue from Millport to Main Street. It's detailed out in this red dashed line, which means that that was a proposed sidewalk extension from the POCD. And then the last is Parade Hill Road here up to Rural Drive. This last extension, again, this is much more difficult to construct, and we'll look at that at a future date to see if we're getting used to the sidewalk. To give you an idea of where we stand overall, you can see those segments. This segment is complete. We're looking at redoing the intersection, Park Street. We have a grant to complete this. That should be done. Richmond Hill, we have a grant to do this piece. This segment's been completed at Richmond and Grove. Park and Richmond Hill has been completed, and there was a section at Mead and Park that's been completed. This section on Millport will be reconstructed this year as part of paving. This section of Old Norwalk Road has been completed, and we'll look at this section of White Oak Shade at a future date. This section, as mentioned, at Park Street is under a grant. This section of Seminary has been completed, and we're looking at these last 2 pieces here. And as far as this stretch between Richmond Hill and Elm Street, we'll look at that at a later date, but this stretch from Elm Street to Irwin Park has been completed. So we're probably 70%, 75% done of everything that was on the 2014 plan moving forward. So we were, we're trying to attack each one, and they align very well with residential requests. So the POCD lines up exactly very well with residential requests and where we're getting petitions for additional sidewalks. I don't know if you have any questions.
Questions for Mr. Mann, please.
This is Krista Nielsen. On the first two segments you talked about, both on Old Stamford Road, do they connect to each other?
Yes, they do. It was just, yeah, they're under two different design, same designer, just two different projects. The second one, the segment from Bristow to Gower Road is probably going to be a little bit more problematic for the DOT. The first stretch is very similar, very simple. So we're trying to keep the two separate because we don't want one to get derailed for the other. And the first segment from Park Street to Bristow is already under design, and we feel we can construct that hopefully this season. The one from Bristow to Gower Road will probably take us all season and we'll look to construct next year. So two separate segments, but yes, they do connect.
Okay, and are they on the same side of the road, or is there a pedestrian?
They're on the
crossing?
same side of the road.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
right.
all on, yeah. It basically, the sidewalk will come from Park Street to Bristow. We have a turn off, small parking area and an area for school buses to come in and drop children off planned. And then the sidewalk from there would extend from that turn off in that parking area straight through to Gower Road. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Engel, you're too polite for P and Z. We just jump in.
What's the process for communicating with the affected neighbors, and where are we in this process?
It's a great question. So normally they come through as a petition, right? So every extension usually has a petition associated with it, but then we send out a letter with a preliminary design, usually at the 30% design. So we actually have sort of the survey is complete. We know where we might be on the roadway, and then we send a letter with that design to the residents asking for their comments specifically. And it doesn't matter whether they're across the street or on the same side of the street. We'll send that letter with that plan and then reach out to them, gather those comments, bake those into the design if we can, go forward to about a 90% completion, send it back out to the residents for a final review, and then finalize the plan and go to bid. Normally, I spend a lot of time in everyone's living room having cups of coffee, talking to them about what's exactly going to happen in front of their house. So it's a very similar thing to what we did on Main Street. I met with almost every single resident on Main Street, and I plan to do the same thing here for each one of these.
And so
Anybody
with our approval starts that process.
Yes. Yeah. This is a necessary step.
This is John Chris. What is the construction materials you plan to use for these sidewalks?
We'll be looking for each one of these will be concrete. And then depending upon the alignment, if it's alongside the edge of the road, our standard is to armor plated with granite curb. And if there's a grass shelf, we'll use a bituminous curb as the curbing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Since he mentioned materials, has there been any feedback, negative or otherwise, on the very sharp granite curbing that you've been putting out for the last couple of years?
Very, very minimal, to be honest. And then after one season, our plows seem to take off the edge. And then the comments go away. It's usually in the parking areas, say downtown, is where we get the most complaints. Where on Main Street, where we had granite running up and down the length of the street, we didn't get any complaints there. It's usually in the downtown area when we install granite that we get the complaints, from a parallel parking standpoint.
Tiger, it looks really good. Question for you on a couple of big trees in the way. Have you thought about working around the trees and things like that, where you can put some gravel down and bridge that kind of tree apron?
Yeah, that's part of the initial alignment. What we wind up doing is we get the survey done, Then we walk the entire roadway, the entire alignment, look at everything, verify that the survey is correct, anything that we might be missing on the survey, and then take a look at what we might be able to do in and around each tree. I then have the tree warden go out, take a look at each tree, see, and determine the tree's health. Sometimes they're in decline, and if they're in decline, we might choose to remove. And then we'll see whether or not we can work around the tree, bridge the roots, and then the last would be to removal. The last alternative would be to remove the tree itself. If we do that, then we look to try to replant in those areas if we can, the right tree in the right place at that point in time. But that's the overall hierarchy where we try to work around the tree without necessarily giving you a complete jog where, when the tree is removed, you see this circle around the tree itself. And then we try to either root prune and bridge the gap, or then if we have to, and there's no other alternative, we'll look to remove.
Got it. Thank you. It's
You're
exciting
welcome.
to see.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we're good. Commissioners, as you know, the motion we need is whether this project is consistent or not consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Do I have a motion?
I'll be glad, this is Commissioner Cassavant, to move that the report is consistent with the POCD.
Thank you, Mr. Cassavant. Do I have a second?
Second, John.
Okay, Mr. Chris. Yeah, one thing that I will note is it's just amazing when you put in sidewalks, how it just seems to bring out people. I look at Elm Street to Irwin, and it's just amazing how it revitalizes things. So I think it's a great expenditure of our taxpayer dollars. Any other comments, or I'll call the question? Okay, I'll call the question. I vote yes. John Chris,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Kent Turner,
Yes.
John Engel,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
James Bash.
Yes.
Great, passes. Thank you, Tiger.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Okay, so as I noted, 255 South Avenue is withdrawn, 190 Brushy Ridge Road, we expect to be open at the February meeting. Therefore, there are no votes for item number 5. Before I introduce 64 Main Street, a note to Mrs. Kaufman and the pre-app for Burtis. You'll be following Main Street, just to give you the heads up there. I'm going to move the calendar around, the agenda around a little bit. But let's go to 64 Main Street. Upon application of 62-64 Main LLC, owner for site plan application approval for a personal establishment, section 42C7, a hair salon in the retail A zone at 64 Main Street. Who's here to present, please?
So I don't believe that.
Greta should be on.
Greta Vesta's here.
Oh, okay. I don't see you, but okay.
I think it is the person named Greta is your name Zoom user. Is that you?
Oh, I guess it didn't.
Oh,
Yeah, that's me. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's quite all right. Please state your name, please, and please proceed.
My name's Greta Vesta, and my plan is to open a hair salon. I've been a hairstylist in New Canaan for about 7 years now. It's the plan is to have about 6 stations, 2 of which will be color and 4 styling and haircuts, 2 shampoo bowls, shampooing stations, a small retail area. The color room is all the way in the back, as you can see here on the sketch, and that's pretty much it. And we're also actually there's currently 2 bathrooms in the space, and the plan is to get rid of one of the bathrooms and just keep the current bathroom that's also handicap accessible.
Okay, do I have questions for the applicant?
Mm-mm.
Everybody good?
It's Ken Turner. I have a quick question on the accessible bathrooms. I don't see in the plan any grab bars, and I believe that's an existing condition. Could you let us know if in fact they do conform to ADA and the grab bars exist?
Currently they are in there, yes.
Okay,
The,
great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, everybody good? Okay, super. Okay, this is closed. Do I have a motion for approval or denial?
John Chris, I move we approve.
Mr. Chris, reasons for approval, please?
I see, I'm pleased to have a fully ADA bathroom. In my view, it conforms with our zoning code. It seems to be an important amenity for our town. Helps promote traffic in our business area. Would see that as a plus, supporting our downtown merchants.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. I think I saw a second from you. Is that correct?
Second.
Second from
Yes.
Mr. Turner. Any further discussion of the motion? Okay, I call the question. John Goodwin, I vote yes. John Chris,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Ken Turner,
Yes.
John Engel,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
James Bash.
Yes.
Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, so as I noted, next, we will do a pre-application for 11, 21, and 25 Burtis Avenue and the Cherry Street parking lot. I think if Mrs. Kaufman's presenting, she's familiar with this, but it's also important for your client to know this, that any feedback, any questions, anything negatively presented, anything positively presented, any ideas put forth to which you may agree or disagree. None of this discussion implies any sort of approval down the road. Mrs. Kaufman, you handling this?
Hi, good evening. Yes, I am. Are you ready for me to begin?
Yeah, floor is yours. You heard what I
Okay,
said.
thank you.
You
What was
heard
that?
the introduction? You heard my
I
introduction?
certainly, I
Okay.
heard, I'm familiar with it, and
Just wanted to make sure.
I have wonderful clients who are fully aware of the warning label. But thank you so much to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the commission and to your staff for putting us on so quickly. While this really seems like a great opportunity tonight to move forward with this and share this really exciting project with you. I'm here tonight with two others. I have Phil Palmgren, who is a partner with Replace Urban Studios in New York. He's an architect and an architect on this project, but also he is the principal with the ownership entities, which consist of 3 separate entities for the 4 properties, Ventana 11 Burtis, Ventana 21, 25 Burtis, and Ventana Cherry, all LLCs. They purchased the properties in December of 2021, and they have been working together. Their 2 additional partners include Bill and Dan Shepro, who are father and son, and also business partners and acquaintances of Mr. Palmgren's. They are all Fairfield County, are very, very familiar with New Canaan, with your regulations, with its high standards, and are excited about this opportunity. Mr. and Mr. Shepro are not here with us tonight, but an additional architect with Replace, Jennifer Aslani, is also here. And the 3 of us had an opportunity last month to meet with zoning and engineering staff to start to discuss the conceptual plans. And we have a nice packet to share with you tonight. And Lynn, may I ask, can we also include Jennifer Aslani in the presentation so that she has the slides that we would like to share, if that's possible?
Oh, so you don't want to share the one I have loaded on the website?
We have, we added 2 additional slides today, which I sent to you so you have them. But if we
Yeah.
may include that.
You could share it. Can she raise her hand? Because I can't.
Sure.
seem to see
Jennifer, would
from-
you raise your hand, please?
Oh.
No, like on the.
Oh,
on
they're
the-
there. There's Jennifer and Phil.
How do you do it?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Have you had a
So wait, there's one more. Is there one more Zoom I'm missing?
Nope, that's it. You have them both
Oh,
in the same.
Okay.
They're very high tech there. We have 2 people. They have a split screen, it looks like. Very efficient. While they start to pull that up, I think you're all very familiar with this property. I know it's been looked at many times by others in recent history. It's just about 3/4 of an acre, and it's located on the southerly side of Burtis Avenue and the southeast corner of Cherry Street. So we can advance to that first slide to give us a sense of where we are. So you can see that it's outlined there in white. So these are the sites that consist of that curved lot, the Cherry Street lot, which is adjacent to the utility building and its lot. And this is in the Business A zone. And you can also see on the picture to the right-hand side, the proposed development. There's a walking path to the train station. It's roughly a 6-minute walk along Elm Street through the downtown. And so this will be a nice opportunity for some transit-oriented development, and an even better opportunity, and perhaps your first to exercise the new affordability regulation that you adopted last fall. The properties here, we have 4. Maybe we advance to our next slide too. We can see we have 4 here. Jennifer, you can highlight the 4, because the first one sometimes is a little confusing. This is 21 to 25 Burtis, 11 Burtis. Oh, I'm sorry, 11. Yeah, that's 11 where she is now, and 21 to 25 before, and then the Cherry Street lot to the south. And then we can advance to our next slide and see our downtown and the zoning map. The subject parcels are outlined in red on the right-hand side, and you can see the Business A zone is identified there by the yellow color. And so this property has Business A zone on all 4 sides of it, and then also to the west, it abuts the retail A zone. The proposal will include to merge all 4 of these properties and develop them with a residential development. There will be with a live-work component, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, with also amenity spaces for the residents, concealed parking, and a mix of different type of multifamily uses, which would be, in the massing here too, would be broken up into several buildings. So the proposal includes 7 buildings over these 4 lots, and a total of 26 residential units. And those will be inclusive of both flats and townhomes, and a mix of bedrooms of 1, 2, and 3, and an 8 ground floor live work offices. And the idea here is to invigorate the ground floor of Burtis. Jennifer, if you don't mind just showing us here with your arrow, where the live work on the ground floor. Typically, we see in some of these mixed uses under the retail and business zones, a requirement for, or an expectation, I shouldn't say a requirement, but certainly an expectation for retail or other type of activated commercial uses on the ground level. And Burtis has not been a very active retail street. And given that what we've seen in the downtown, and to not deplete from what is already a very robust market, an alternative is proposed here, what we call a live work unit. And I'll allow Philip and Jennifer to tell you a little bit more about this, because they're very, very well educated and have been both implementing this in other communities, but they're also a resource, and experts on the subject, have been commissioned to write several industry articles on this concept. And this concept connects a small office that really serves as the office for an individual who would live up above it. They're not connected through stairs. One would have to leave their apartment or their condo and then enter in the front. But it provides that same goal of activating a street front. So we can talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but I think it's an exciting concept. It's a new concept, and it seems perfectly suited for this part of town, which otherwise has not seen Burtis Avenue has not been a very, very active retail street. At the corners, you turn a little bit here. If we turn onto Cherry, there will be ground floor amenity space provided there, typical amenity space for tenants. All of the parking is concealed behind these buildings, so it will not be visible from the street. And then there's new landscaping, but also I think what's very exciting here is that there will be plazas, upper plazas. So where you see some of these green plazas, those are actually located a little bit higher than street level. And it provides a really, really interesting opportunity for residents to enjoy a rooftop that doesn't really look like a rooftop, but also provides a greening of space beyond just the ground level, where you can see some of the green areas along Cherry Street, but then to provide some interest at at what really is now a plaza level, a little bit higher than just ground level. So let's continue, I think, to let me see where we are in our next slide. Can we continue to our next slide, Jennifer? Oh, let's go back. This is not fun to look at, but I'll summarize this for you. And I provided a written summaries. My comments tonight I've also provided to you so that you have an opportunity to reference them going forward. But so as I mentioned, 26 total units. The sizes of the units range from 1,000 to about 3,400. There will be 4 affordable units that are provided here on site that are mixed throughout the buildings. Total of 8 live work units. Those units are roughly 200 to 300 square feet, and the parking total is 51. So each of the buildings that you see, if you can hover over, you can see where 11 Burtis is. That will include 8 units over 2 floors, and then the 3 live work units, at the ground level. 21 Burtis, and that's roughly about 23,000 square feet, 11 Burtis. The next building at 21 to 25 Burtis is approximately 36,000 square feet. It includes 11 units. Here we have a mix of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And then the tenant amenity space, which I also mentioned, is located in this spot. And then the Cherry Street lot includes 5 townhomes, 2 of which are connected, roughly consisting of about 14,000 square feet total, 3 single family units and 2 duplexes. And these include a range of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. To achieve this, we in our discussions with staff, believe that we will need a text change to define what a live work unit is. And because there is nothing quite like it in your regulations, although there are certain live work uses that are similar, but they're not quite what's envisioned for this part of town. So this will be a new definition we propose, and we would infuse also into the retail B and business A zones, that this would be a use permitted by special permit. And that would be in lieu of any commercial requirement or expectation on a ground level. The site will have both a site plan application as well and a special permit application. Those mostly will come to you under your typical section for business A and retail B, as those 2 are connected in their development standards. And we've done that in a few places here downtown together. And then also under section 7.6, which is the affordability regulation. And the regulation permits here up to 26 residential units with 21 base units. And then the three additional 15% of that would be 3 units, although here we're providing 4, and that also incentivizes or activates the bonus opportunities, which we will also use and be asking for a special permit for. And once those bonus amenities are triggered, it presents an opportunity to further ask for some additional design standard modifications. That would include additional height, up to 50 feet of height here. Now, we included that in our plans. The final topos and the civil set have not been completed yet, so these may be altered and it may change. We may see a reduction in it. But of course, our plans right now are still somewhat conceptual, but we have tried to use existing information to the best of our ability to prepare for this conversation. And then we are also looking to have some clarification on wall length. Typically, business A requires an 80-foot maximum for a wall length, and the 21 Burtis wall length would exceed that. However, because we're in the retail B has no limitation on wall length. And the business A regulations permit the development of this property pursuant to retail B standards, which is what we are going for. So it's our interpretation is that the retail B standard controls, but we look to you and to staff to also clarify that for us. And we've of course gone through the town plan of conservation and development and the senior housing needs regulation with a fine-tooth comb, and have found many places where this type of development would meet several of the goals in both of those documents. But I'd like to allow Jennifer and Philip to share with you a little bit more here about the design and some of the massing that they've proposed.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. I know we've been in and out, like it's the muting and unmuting is a little rough. So maybe just to introduce ourselves a little bit to you. I'm Philip, this is Jennifer. You know, one of the interesting things about this site and for me is that, you know, I've practiced architecture now for the better part of about 30 years. I've basically educated at Columbia University, live in Brooklyn right now, my wife and 2 kids. You know, I grew up in Fairfield, basically 4 exits down the Merritt Parkway. So I know New Canaan pretty well. My partner, Bill, the reason that we came to this parcel was my partner, Bill, his dad is actually a local attorney in Fairfield. We went to high school together, and it's sort of a dream of ours to develop something in the Fairfield County area. And so this opportunity came in front of us, and one of the interesting things for us is that we looked at your town and we realized what a wonderful town it is. Spent a little time there walking around, understanding it, and obviously we think there's something that we can offer in terms of our talents with regards to not only development, but also I would say qualitative design. And so, you know, it's probably a little unusual to hear a developer talk about design, but as an architect who's practiced all over the world, you know, and notably in other areas in Fairfield County, it's a real great opportunity, I think, to bring something that's a little bit different, a little bit interesting, high quality to downtown New Canaan in an area where, you know, something like this can offer a different way of perhaps living in downtown, multi-generational, walkable, transit-oriented. So can you do the next one, Tim? Next one. So I'll just take you through, I mean, I think the best way to present this to you guys is through sort of the concepts that we generate the design based upon. This notion of live work and sort of the ideas around live work. It's a 6-minute walk from our site to the Metro North train station. We all know as we're sitting here Zooming together that the world has changed somewhat. And how much and how many people are getting on that train and going into New York City has obviously changed over the last 2 years. There's a lot of flexibility in work models, a lot of changes in work models. It's not to say that offices won't be needed in the future, but there's basically the way people are seeing work now is perhaps I'll go to the office 3 days, I'll stay home 2 days. And as we all know, I have small children. Having an opportunity to be home but be at work at the same time is a really great amenity. And I think it's a great amenity of your town. I think one of the amazing things is that we can offer, particularly on a street like Burtis, where it isn't in the heart of downtown, but sort of off the beaten path. We're not on Main Street, we're not on Elm Street. It's an opportunity in what most people would feel like is a very sort of marginal retail zone to actually offer office at grade, as opposed to trying to put retail at grade where, along Main Street, we walk down Main Street and there are a lot of retail store shops, storefronts that are sitting empty. This is a way to bring some life down to the street. And, from our extensive work, both in Memphis, New Orleans, Stratford, Connecticut, Mamaroneck, New York, understanding how live work can work for a community where retail is not always the best answer. It's interesting because we actually believe the residents will come, and because they're not connected areas to their residences, that they'll come down to the street and they'll work out of these separated office spaces. What that does for your local community is, and you guys can imagine, if you have an office in your house, if you need a cup of coffee, you go to your coffee maker, Mr. Coffee, and grab yourself a cup of coffee here, because you've left your house, you've come down to the street, you're sitting in your office, your small accessory office here. More than likely, you may in fact get out of your seat and walk to downtown and buy a cup of coffee. So, it's a way of engaging the community that's a little bit different than just simply residences above retail. And we think, particularly with regards to the COVID world, it offers the opportunity to work from New Canaan for 2 days a week. Perhaps you'll hop on the train for meetings 3 days a week. And so for us, we think this is a model that, rather than having everyone Zooming from their back bedroom or their study in their house, perhaps working just slightly outside of your house and taking those accessory offices and putting them down on the street is a way that both benefits the town, but also benefits your residents who move into the multifamily units. So I think, one of the things here, and I'll just briefly touch upon this, is, on the ground floor, we're talking about actually reducing the number of curb cuts along Burtis Street. One of the things, if you've ever been along Burtis Street, it's a pretty tough environment there. On the one side, on the other side of the street, parking, strip mall, egress from the Chase Bank. And on our side, there's 11 Burtis, which is a 1976 built office space, underparked, even though we recently bought it, and a bunch of parking in 2 older homes on 2125. And so how this street sort of begins to become part of the everyday of folks who could live in New Canaan, one of the things is we understand managed parking is a super important piece of the puzzle. And so we're going to be reducing our curb cuts. There are 3 curb cuts along the parcels or actually 4 curb cuts along the parcels right now. We reduce that by 2. The idea is that Burtis is one way, would be one way into the parking, and obviously one way out to Cherry Street. We're obviously working with civil engineers and our traffic engineers to figure out the mechanics of this, but I think this is the sort of concept in this stage. Again, I think Jackie brought it up earlier. There are 51 parking spaces we be putting on site, which would meet with the code requirement with regards to unit counts, Again, we understand it's very preliminary and we're in preliminary design phases on this too, but this is our intent. Next. And I'll just quickly take you through sort of, can you click next one? Next one. So I think one of the ideas, and much like we were talking about this idea of live work, one of the other sort of important points, and I think Jackie introduced it earlier, is this idea that each of the multifamily buildings are actually centered around a central courtyard. So you can see here in the middle of the development that these central courtyards begin to organize the units around them. The idea is not that, actually go down one, sorry, I'll go down one more. So at grade, if you're coming down Burtis Street, you'd be walking down Burtis, you'd come into the lobby, and then you would walk up in the lobby into a centralized courtyard. We all know, again, with COVID and this notion of outside has a safety associated with it. I think and this is very much a Parisian model in its sort of construct. The idea is that you would have sort of garden level, plaza level apartments that are above the raised parking. So you'd have the offices along the street that shield the street from the parking behind it. You would come into the lobby, you'd move up through the lobby to a plaza, and then you would enter sort of the not only a plaza, but it's the place that you would enter your unit into. And so this idea of having a sort of privatized public space is something that we feel like is a way to organize these units in an interesting, less obtrusive way to what most people have adverse reactions to with regards to multifamily, which are the long hallways, single elevator. What we're talking about is a quality application of ways in which to move not from the street into your units, organizing it always around these green spaces. I think also down in the townhomes, it's a similar idea. So you have the two plaza spaces, and then down at grade in the plaza area, and it's a little akin to this sort of idea of suburban driveways, but that essentially people could park below their townhouses, but that area out there would be landscaped in a way that allows children to play in a sort of larger courtyard. Perhaps there's, exchange of neighbors. Our goal here is to sort of build a sort of model where the open spaces arrange how you move through the space, but also how you move up into your own unit. Go ahead, next one. Next one. And so I think not only do you have the plaza units, but then up above, you would have duplex units, and they'd all be accessed from the sort of elevating, private elevating, again, thinking about COVID and shared interior spaces. I think the idea here is that basically these would be up in the sky. They have a more sort of gracious view out. But again, I think, thinking about how people move through the space based on the open space. I think another point, and this is the upper floor, which would exist in the roof structure of the building. Again, you'd have 4 duplex units in 11, you'd have 4 duplex units in 8, and then the townhomes along Cherry Street. I think one of the things to note as well is, can you go to the next one? No, maybe go back. Sorry, everybody. I think the other thing is, and it comes to affordable housing, and we're very mindful of affordable housing and trying to meet the requirements of the new affordable housing regulations. In each one of the multifamilies, there'd be an affordable housing unit, and then 2 of the townhomes. So there's 3 single family townhomes, and there are 2 duplex townhomes. In the duplexes, there would be 2 affordable housing units. And so, just from our work in terms of multi-generational, mixed income housing, it's something that we believe in as a design company. And so for us, we want to meet this requirement. And we obviously want to work with the commission and the town to make sure that we're meeting that and providing that in a way that is beneficial to everyone. And so, you know, that's another component of the massing and the heights is we're trying to follow those, but provide the little bit more than the minimum requirement for affordable housing. Next, let's go to the, so just to get you guys centered a little bit on here, this is looking down Burtis from Maine. As you can see, the bulk is pretty, and the street wall is contained. And then as you move, can you go to the next one? And then as you move down sort of Burtis Street, you begin to see it kind of dissipate. And so our intent here with design is to actually continue that feeling of downtown, down along our parcels, to continue that street wall, to give that feeling of downtown moving to the edge at Cherry Street. And we understand the other side of the street is a bit, the buildings on the other side have a bit of discontinuity to them. And so our hope is by holding that sort of facade along the street wall that we can bring some order to the area. Next one. I think the other thing and like another concept that I'll talk about is this notion of materiality. You know, our practice is built on a sort of design aesthetic of simplicity. And so here, you know, we always say you need to earn the ability to get to 4 materials. So for us, we're always about finding 3 materials to work on a facade. And so here what we're proposing, and we think it could be really beautiful and a sort of simplistic kind of, I'd say contextual iconic way, is the sort of primary facade material would be a limestone, which is a very warm stone. I don't know if you guys know that or have seen the material. It has a sort of veining in it that's really a beautiful veining. The windows, doors along this facade, we feel like could be a low iron glass with steel frame windows and doors. And then one of the ideas is that the sort of, and perhaps we'll get the folks across the street, which is the New Canaan Forge, to make these for us, sort of a filigree dark metal detailing, which would essentially be the transoms of the windows and the sort of railings along these sort of larger door window openings. And the roof would be this sort of standing seam metal roof. Next one. So you can see as we move around the site, now we're on the corner, sort of at the bend of Cherry. And then you can see the frontier is there on the left. So as you can see, you see 11 Burtis, which is the office building in the foreground. And so we're going to look a little bit at the townhomes to give you guys a sense of what the townhomes will look like. Again, trying to keep to that idea of 3 materials. You know, this sort of primary facade would be a low iron Roman brick, 20.5 inches long, 1.5 inches in width, with the natural wood and the glass, the detailed dark metal with the roofs being standing seams. So similar materials rhyming in, you know, as being from Connecticut, I always love the Mark Twain, you know, history doesn't often repeat, but it often rhymes. So on these facades rhyming with the sort of Mark Twainian Connecticut side of things. Thanks. And now looking from the base of Cherry, looking up towards Main Street. And sort of this is that, so now you're at that view and you're beginning to see sort of the multifamily on the left, the town, or the multifamily is on the right. I think if I have my mirroring correct, I don't know how you guys see it, but on the right, the multifamily, on the left, the townhomes. On this facade, you begin to see some of the natural wood paneling, which will screen the parking below the townhomes, and then begin to form that sort of that mass along that captures the amenity, which is, and beyond it is the plaza for the interior of the multifamily. Next. And this is the section to give you guys a sense of how the parking and the entrance into the multifamilies work. You can see the car up at the street at Burtis. The parking will ramp down, come down, and the parking will sit sort of below the Burtis Street elevation. And then the cars will come past the multifamily and out past the townhomes to Cherry. The site is super challenged by the topography, and so this is kind of the response to that. Next. I think this is the massing of it, and you can see in terms of context, it fits within sort of the bulk along Main Street. And what we're hoping for is that to bring that sort of bulk down along the boundary of Cherry, and begin to fill in that feel of downtown, the boundary of downtown towards Cherry Street. I think the other thing, one of the things about our practice that always works through any of the work that we do, we're super environmentally sustainable. We really believe in wellness in building practices. And I think one of the things when it comes to that is to not put upon your neighbor what you could do on your own site. And so what we're talking about here are rainwater, gray water and rainwater reuse on the site, so that we're not dumping our waste into the local sewer system, geothermal wells, and solar panels. We're hoping that we can reach a place where we're not actually drawing off of the grid for any of the cooling or heating requirements of any of the structures on the site.
That's it.
That's it. That's where we are.
Thank you, Philip.
All right, I know it's long-winded. I apologize. We're really excited. Can I say one thing, Jackie? We're super excited.
I thought it was great. No, I thought that was great, and I hope that the commission, I'm sure they have questions for us, so we will defer back to them now. I will say that we have hired a traffic consultant who is currently beginning his work now, and also the civil engineering team is also working on refining their civil package. So depending on the feedback that we receive from you now, we will either will impact the amount of time we take before filing something, or perhaps we piecemeal our application and provide to you a text change that could accommodate this in the near future, possibly even within the next month, if not sooner, and then follow up with site and special permit applications.
Commissioners, questions for the team?
Mr. Chairman, on Chris, question.
So it's a really interesting concept, and thank you for the presentation. Just looking through some of our regulations that relate to this project, I think the thing that stands out to me, and I recognize, Mrs. Kaufman, that you mentioned that there could be an adjustment to the overall height. But just to make all aware, we have a maximum building height requirement of the height shall be 30 feet or 2.5 stories, whichever is less. And I think that changes to, by special permit in a retail B zone, the maximum building height may be increased by above 30 feet and up to 3 stories, provided the commission shall make a number of findings. So, just thinking about this within the context of the quaint New England downtown that we have, I think, that would be my principal concern is that height within that context.
Thank you. The height that has been proposed, Chair, and we'll take that into consideration, has been motivated by the height adjustments that are permitted by special permit under the new affordability standard, which does allow up to 50 feet if affordable units are provided on site. And certainly that's a site by site basis as part of your special permit review. So we'll take that into consideration as we refine the plans. And also I should also mention that part of that height is achieved because, and the stories become less relevant because any story of the building, a basement or a partial basement that it's used for parking or storage or non-habitable space is or can be exempted from the total. So that's where that initial height became proposed.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, can you go back to the elevation? I think one of the, and again, I don't think we would propose in another situation or with different topography, something of this height. I think you can see the line of the, and Jen, can you go over there? The height of the buildings on Main Street are actually that height over where you can see her line. So we're actually below, because of the topography of the site, it's actually falling off. And so even though it seems, and I know our graphics are somewhat, because we're trying to describe the project to you guys, from Main Street, it actually is less intrusive. And so I just wanted to point that out. I don't, again, we understand the question of height and bulk here. We do believe in the affordable housing that you guys approved in terms of height, but we're trying to obviously be as understanding of that as possible. So, and understanding your downtown height and where you guys are along Main, we're trying to respect that and be a bit below it, if that's okay. But we understand it for sure.
How does the tallest building on Main Street or on Elm Street, sorry, this is Dan Radman, by the way. The tallest building is at the corner of Main and Burtis, the brick building. Yeah, the one to the right there. And that's purely a byproduct of the fact that it's a 3-story building with a really tall parapet height above the 3rd story and tall ceilings on the 3rd story.
Yeah.
How tall is that building, and then how tall, regardless of the slope? I know you're trying to compare sight lines, but I really don't care how tall a building is that's, a block or 2 away. How tall is that building at its height, at its maximum height, and how does that compare to the height of your building?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's probably 40.
I was gonna say 38, 40.
So again, and we don't have it off the top of our heads, what the height of that building is. We always talk in relativity in terms of height. And so, because obviously ground plane slopes, and so where relative height happens, we could get back to you on that, and we'll, obviously in our next submission, we'll definitely mark what that height is. In your zoning code, average height is based on the 4 corners of the building. And
right.
Then understanding from those 4 corners, I think we haven't done the analysis of that building per se, but I know on our building proposed, we're below the allowable for the 4 corners against the inclusionary housing or the Affordable Housing Act. So we're actually below, I think 11 Burtis is at 45 feet, 45 feet if you measure the 4 corners. But we can get back to you on that. I don't know the answer, sorry.
You mentioned, sorry, one more question. You mentioned visiting and analyzing the context and fabric of the downtown New Canaan area, the majority of which are 2-story buildings in the business district. There's only a rare building that's a 3. You think this development is sympathetic to the rest of the context of the town?
You know,
Given
it's
the,
interest. Yeah.
given the scale and the design.
Do you have? I can't see who's talking. I don't know if you could. Sorry. You know, we looked a lot at your downtown and sort of the contextual matters, the contextual sort of understanding. We looked a lot at 21 Forest, which is actually 4 stories, much like ours. It has parking underneath and then a plaza and 2 floors above. And so when we begin to understand, and I don't think 21 Forest is by any stretch imposing in your downtown. But if, and I hate to throw this one out there, but if you look at the view, which is, you know, up on a hill and it sort of lords over downtown, it's a different kind of construct. And so we've looked at your downtown, we understand sort of topography and understanding height. And so I would say we're more in the line of 21 Forest and less in the line of the view. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's, when we look at it, we feel like from our perspective and even in our roof treatment, because what we really are is we're 3.5 stories. We're trying to sort of set back the upper floors. It'll really read as a parking level and 2 floors above, and then a roof structure, which is something that's been done basically throughout history in terms of architecture, as a way to sort of hide that that upper floor in that roof structure in a mansard roof, so that it'll feel like roof and it won't feel like 4 stories on the street. So we definitely understand the concern, and we are trying, particularly with the parking requirement, to be mindful of that.
A few questions, Commissioner Kriz. Part of the building is going to be next to what's now the telephone building and has several communication arrays on its roof. I'm just wondering if, given these new higher buildings next to it, now there's a parking lot called the telephone lot, so it's nothing there, whether these buildings may interfere with those communication devices.
I can't answer that in terms of the science of it. I know we're actually below the height of those antennas. Again, we've been in talks with Frontier around, you know, doing construction on these sites as part of sort of outreach to the neighbors. But obviously we'll be mindful of those things. And I think there's been some interest, and I don't want to hint at where the interest comes from, but around helping that parcel be a little bit of a better neighbor. You know, there's a temporary boiler in the back of the site. There's some other sort of infrastructural things going on there. And so we're mindful of that. And we are, as good neighbors, we'll work with them to hopefully be mindful of their needs and hopefully mindful of the town's needs. So.
And also with the geothermal you're putting in, wondering about environmental effects. I've known some people put in geothermal and they have to, it's very site specific. And so I'm assuming that you've already done analyses that this site would be sympathetic to geothermal. Would that be correct, sir?
It's correct. We've done obviously very preliminary studies around it. Again, you know, we're at a stage in design where our goals, like we're sort of putting out our goal to be able to use geothermal. And obviously with the new technologies around heat pumps and solar, it's our hope that we could get to a zero-sum game with regards to energy usage. And the number of bores, if you know about this technology, oftentimes some of the bores don't work. But we're hopeful. So at this stage, I'd say we've done some preliminary work on it and we think we can achieve some of it. So that's sort of where we are.
My understanding also with geothermal is that as part of the installation, there is hydraulic fracturing or fracking in order to make the system work. So I guess you would have to do that for this site. Sorry.
Well, we're again, I want to be really cautious about this. This is our goal. And I think one of the things is that how bore fields actually happen and how they work, we will be much more in depth of studying and understanding how that works. I think our goal set isn't necessarily to put bores into the earth, but rather to figure out a way to heat and cool the site and the buildings here without drawing off the electric grid. And so that can be achieved through solar, through geothermal offsets. We're hopeful we're going to get to a zero with regards to heating and cooling the buildings. So that's sort of where we are.
Also, I had a question on the live work units. That area is along the street front in Burtis is really a very long strip and not very deep. And so it seems to me from a real estate perspective that making use of that for standard retail or a restaurant would be kind of tough given how deep it is. It's sort of shaped like a bowling alley. And that the live work is more kind of a, gee, what do we do with the space? We'll make it a live work. And when I'm thinking long term, also, if you go to the zoning map of the town downtown, I'm going to spitball here and look across the street. And basically, I think probably in 5 years, many, if not all, the buildings that are across the street from on Burtis, across the street from your attended site, as well as onto East Avenue, many of which are older, are probably not going to, couldn't very well not be there. And so we're looking at potentially a redevelopment of things across the street in the not too distant future. Not that I have any inside information, but I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen. And so there'd be an issue of what would the retail be or the grade activities be on that side of the street. And if we look at other smaller one-way streets like Forest, which has been now a very popular restaurant street, it could be here, it's quiet. You could even restrict the parking a bit if the town in its infinite wisdom decides to do that. With outdoor amenities and so forth, it could be a nice quiet stroll. And so I just worry that there may be, the site may be locking itself into a certain use given the design. And I don't want to end up not writing ourselves an option as a town in order to do something else with that street. And so I'd like to discuss that for a moment, if I may. Please.
Is that a question for me or the group?
Question for anyone who wants to answer it on your side. Thank you. I'm wondering about other uses on this. I'm not sure how useful even the live work will be in this context. It tends to mean more sort of incubator space and so forth. And just
can I just yeah, sorry, I'll respond a little bit to it, right? And then I'll let the group sort of respond. We've done extensive, we were hired by New York City EDC. We've done work for Prudential Financial Impact Investment. We've been involved in understanding live work construct in towns and cities across America. I think from our understanding of how best to engage the street, particularly where you walk around along Main Street and you see empty retail stores, or you see shops that aren't active, by putting more into the marketplace, you're actually devaluing those places and you're actually making more empty storefronts. So from that standpoint, we felt like by putting more retail into the marketplace, that you actually are not understanding what's really needed in New Canaan. That said, I think some of the other responses we've heard from some folks we talked to about this proposal is, if we aren't doing retail there, what are you doing, right? And so that's sort of it, right? Like if it isn't a spa or it isn't a hair salon or if it isn't retail, what are we doing along that stretch? And I get we can't future cast what new uses will be across the way. We equally feel like, a lot of times, so for instance, I think up on the view, they simply put a shielding wall and they put parking right to the street edge. We don't feel like that's the right thing for your town either. And so from our point of view, and I know this sounds a little strange, but to have accessory office spaces for the units up above and hoping that people will walk down the stairs and go in the front door from the street is the best hope for Burtis to become active and for it actually to be a place where someone will take the chance across the street. Because right now, nobody's taking a chance across the street, and it's actually New Canaan Forge, it's a laundromat, and it's a sort of 2 beauty salons, and the backside of a secondhand clothing shop. So parking, and so for us, we're like, let us be the first in, and hopefully by doing this, maybe a little bit innovative, sort of different approach. Perhaps we can inspire others to take the chance on Burtis. And I think putting a whole bunch of more retail into your downtown, and I love Forest Street, I love the restaurants, I love Maine, and I love Elm. I don't know, there are a bunch of missing teeth in there, and I'd love to see those fill up before we're like pulling folks who occupy those sites into Burtis. That's sort of why we did what we did.
Yeah, I'm just having a very tough time wrapping my mind around that logic, and I'm a bit skeptical of the livework concept, but I'll move on.
Okay.
I know Ms. Kaufman will be disappointed if I didn't mention that I look forward to hearing your landscape plan. So I'll just say that and move on. You mentioned kids at one point, and I just didn't get a kid-friendly vibe of this place, in particular, since we will have affordable units, some of which will be more than 1 bedroom, and probably have children there. I'm just wondering about children's amenities for any tenants. Thank you.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, at this stage, we haven't programmed sort of the outdoor spaces fully. And I think the idea of the townhomes in particular, and the plaza and the townhomes, and thinking about how kids may use the plaza and the townhomes is something that we definitely have to fill in the blank on. So I appreciate the comment.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Ken Turner. I have a few questions about the circulation. You mentioned that you're going to have a traffic study performed. I think it's very, very important that you have also a circulation study that's done as a part of that. You're introducing some interesting elements as far as tandem parking. The one-way drives are, could be narrow. I'm very curious about service, moving vans, fire department access. And, there's a whole series of movements that have to happen between the pedestrians and the automobile. And I'm just very curious how you're going to address that and convince us that all of this density is going to work on this site.
That is, thank you for that comment, Mr. Turner. That's already included in our to-do list, the circulation study.
Okay, thank you. And another question on sustainability. I, applaud you for thinking about the geothermal, and trying to get to net zero as far as your carbon. Did you give consideration as far as the roofing to a lighter material? I appreciate the aesthetic of the dark metal roof, but albedo effect, you're going in the wrong direction. So you might want to consider a different color or a way of reducing the heat gain that you'll get with the dark roof. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think, again, on the roof and how the shaping of the roof and how it works, we'll certainly think about color on that. But I think one of the things and the reason that we're choosing the color is due to, solar panels are kind of constrained by the aesthetics of solar panels. And so it's sort of us trying to match the aesthetic of the solar panels. One of the nice thing about the Gambro is that actually the upper roof is perfectly angled on the south side to actually capture the solar. And so we're very much in tune with not making that different than the overall roof. So that's why we're kind of in the color palette we're working in. I just, as a sort of comment, but we'll consider it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the limited materials that you've chosen. Basically, I think you got 4 different materials.
Yeah.
I think, it's a very.
Thank you. That's somebody who appreciates us. I'm very much like, whenever I see buildings and I look at buildings, I'm like, wow, why so many? I don't know, sorry.
That's okay. No, I appreciate the thought that went into that and the sophistication. And I think that you need to really consider lighting and maybe other, the landscaping, different methods to really enhance that simplicity and to, maybe introduce a little more life to it. It is residential, and, those elements that you can add, that filigree will be very helpful in, achieving that and not have a sterile kind of, residential tower.
We were hoping through this sort of metal filigree to begin to key to you guys that we're definitely into lighting and sort of fine tuning. Like, we want this to be a really beautiful facade. And so we're with you on that. Like, lighting will be critical. And so that even the metal filigree, we're hoping to sort of get to that place. So we're with you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else?
This is Krista Nielsen. I have a couple of questions probably for Ms. Kaufman about the zoning. So it looks like, if I read the slides properly, that you're including 793 square feet of office. Is that the same as the live work that you're talking about? You're not actually going to call it office, I'm assuming?
That is, yes, that's right. And so we're looking to tie that directly to the residential use. So a resident, they would track together, so they would not be considered an office use. It would be, the residential component would be tied through deed to the live work unit, to the office unit.
Okay.
And so that commercial, that office use is restricted to that particular unit. If you buy unit 1, you are also buying that live work unit, and those two things track together. And there would be a series of restrictions as we started to discuss this with staff, what a live work definition would look like. And that would, I would expect it to include certain restrictions, like the office use would be restricted to that particular space. It could not be conducted in the yard, upstairs on the plaza. It wouldn't be able to infiltrate the residential units in any other way. So we would put some restrictions around it so that it has a zoning definition and a set of expectations.
Okay. And so that 793 square feet of office or live work, as we'll call it in the future, is what's allowing you to do the residential, because mixed use is what's allowed in the business B zone, and you have to have another use besides residential. So that's how you're getting there.
Correct. Yes.
And I know you're pretty familiar with our regulations, but I saw a couple 3-bedroom units and units over 1,500 square feet, which also are allowed, by commission approval through the special permit process. They're not necessarily by right.
That's right. I'm sorry if I failed to mention that. That would be another special permit application that we would request for certain units. I think I identified them in my own notes to myself, how many there were, asking for 3. There are a handful of 3 bedrooms, as well as those 1,500 square feet.
Okay.
But for the most part, they are under it. And that's included in one of the packages. You can see the itemization for each unit.
Yeah,
I
think I saw that slide. And then the last thing I just wanted to make clear with regard to the use of the inclusionary zoning regulations, as you pointed out, we do offer a bonus up to 50 feet, 3.5 stories in height. Again, that's at the commission's discretion. It's not necessarily a given. There was a statement in that regulation requesting that buildings above 30 feet or 2.5 stories be set back from the facade of the building a little bit as you get higher up, so that you're stepping back and you don't just have this straight face. It sounded like from the architects, you guys are working on that.
Yes.
So my last question is, I heard that you're going to use the bonus, potentially use the bonus to increase the height. Now the parking, I heard you say 51 spaces. Is that what's required with the underlying zoning, or is that using
That
any
is
sort of
that is
reduction?
consistent with the underlying zoning regulation for residential uses. So part of that live work definition would identify it to make that consistent with a residential use, and that's because the live work or the unit, the office unit itself, would be directly tied to the residential use. And given the size, the expectation is that it would not draw additional guests to the property if it's of a size that may only be one. For instance, I believe that Philip shared that there would be these dedicated Zoom rooms, and it really is an opportunity for one to work where they live, but a little further afield and not in a back bedroom or in an in-home office space. It provides a little bit of a separation, but it's not a design space to be so large that one would expect multiple visits per day or to the site. So that we're keeping with the parking regulation under the residential parking demand. If in our discussions, or if in your discussions as a commission and with your staff, you have an issue with that, I think that we would then potentially explore some type of parking adjustment under the affordability regulation.
Okay.
And also, as we begin to do the circulation study, things change once we get into the field and we actually apply this to a civil site plan, and things are moved around. Sometimes that does result in the loss of a space here or there. So we're going to be mindful of that as we refine the plan.
Okay, thank you so much.
This is Claire Tiscornia. I just have a quick kind of design concern. One of the reasons I don't like Burtis Avenue at the beginning of the street is because the buildings are so high and it casts a shadow and it creates like a wind tunnel, if you will. And I think if you extend the bulk of that and have it up flush against the sidewalk, I don't think you're doing nothing for the streetscape. I feel like the development has its back to Burtis. You've got these really nice plazas and everything, but it's on the interior of the development. If I'm walking down Burtis, this development does nothing for that experience. And so I would just encourage, I know the live work is there, but I mean, a dedicated Zoom room, that who wants to see that when they walk down the street? I think you can add a lot more design elements and kind of bring it facing Burtis Avenue and add to Burtis Avenue instead of turning your back on it.
I hear your comment. I agree with you. One of the big things about Burtis now is that when you turn off of Main Street, you basically walk against a blank wall, right? If you think about Main and it's a 3-story brick blank wall that you're walking down Burtis. And then, you have the Chase building, and then you have the ATM, and you have, all of a sudden you have things set back off the street, and you have parking lots. And then you have actually, the funny part is you have 11 Burtis, and you have a small sort of Victorian house tucked in there. And the funny part to us, and I actually think it isn't the severity of the street wall. Street walls actually work in a lot of places, like in your downtown Main Street. The street wall actually works. What doesn't work is there's no feeling of depth in the street wall on Burtis. So when you turn it, it's that there's no storefront, there's no penetration to that brick wall that's there. And so for us, we actually have tried really hard to work with understanding that a street wall isn't a bad thing, particularly when you have parking lots across the way, to try and think about how you can penetrate that in an interesting way. And so that's why the metal filigree, and although you're looking at the vastness of the elevation at the moment, we try to be really tactile in the materials we're choosing at the street level and the way we penetrate that storefront. And I think the next time we come back to you, we'll have rendered views of what that'll look like. Because I agree with you, it's a very hard street. It's a challenge, a huge design challenge. I think we may not have solved it yet, but we're working really hard to figure it out. And I think those penetrations and how the office engages the street and what the side, you know, we came in earlier and we heard the board talk about how important it is a sidewalk is that actually can really improve an environment. And so to me, how we address the sidewalk is actually the key to solving that problem. And I get why on Main, when you turn and there's a giant brick wall, we're not into proposing that. So I agree with you. It's hard and we're trying to get there. But I think rendered views will help with that. And I think we understand there needs to be some penetrations in those walls to bring the scale down to the pedestrian. The width of the sidewalk is going to be super important. How the lighting works, I think one of your other board members talked about it. How we sort of engage the street. One of the sort of design influences for us is thinking about Paris and how you have density on a street, but it has a sort of feel to it. And so we're very much, I understand your comment, we're working really hard to get there. If I thought setting back our building 5 feet or penetrating it more was the right answer, I don't think setting it back 5 feet is the answer, because then you get the dirty corners where all the garbage collects. We're hopeful that through penetrating in an interesting way and doing some really fine level scale detailing of the facade will help pedestrians feel super comfortable there. That's sort of, I don't know if it's a response or an answer. I think it's
fine.
That's
Thank you. I look forward to seeing what you present.
Thanks. But we totally understand your comment. It's one of my nervous things about it as well. For sure. It's a tough street. It's a very tough street.
Anybody else?
I said two quick questions, Chairman. Chris Herring.
Sure.
Just on the unit mix, I see that there are 2 one-bedroom units and quite a few, I think 12, if I counted correctly, 2 bedrooms and a good number of 3 bedrooms. I was just interested in the dynamics behind that. Why so few? Because I think one of the special permit criteria is a variety of housing offerings, you know, studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3s, and it seems weighted a little towards the 2 and 3s. And is that to help the project pencil out, or what's the rationale?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and I don't mean to be economic in it, sure, it's a little bit about penciling it out, but I think also our idea around how people get into their units. So, and I don't know if we really talked about this, but the idea that everyone can sort of filter through open space and get up into their units, as opposed to a typical multifamily where you come in, an elevator, go up and walk down a long hallway. We think that's a really terrible experience in COVID, and that's the way you can sort of alter your mix. So for us, what it's about is sort of understanding the open spaces and the sequencing of the open space and how you get up. And I know it's not really a simple answer, but it just sort of results when we look at the number of elevators we're looking at, the plaza levels and the capacities of moving into these buildings, that it results sort of in that. It isn't that we don't want more 1 bedrooms. I think we believe that 2 and 3 bedrooms are great in New Canaan. We believe 1 bedrooms are great in New Canaan too. It's just sort of a nature of the site, a nature of the mixes, nature of the parking. All of these things have driven us sort of to this mix. So I don't know if that's it, if that answers.
No, that's helpful color. Thanks for adding those additional pieces. The second question I had was Just on the site orientation of the plazas, the two northern buildings have, U-like structures, and I really appreciate that design of that common space in the middle. And it's nice to hear about the access directly from that plaza for the different units. But I was looking at it from a north-south axis, and I was trying to understand, why wouldn't, and I'm not an expert here, but why wouldn't you orient them such that the plazas would face south so they wouldn't get as much shadow? Such that, because as they are sitting right now, I think they're all facing east.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We've looked at a number of different massing scenarios and understanding sort of solar. One of the things in our practice that we're really all about is understanding how the solar works and the distance between masses. And one of the things to note is that oftentimes in residential construction, it goes back to typical multifamily, and it's not what we want to do here. We felt like it was important for each of the units to actually have windows on both sides of them. Very unusual. Like if you look at the view, there's a corridor and they only have views in one direction. Here we're saying it's important that you have south light, you have north light. I mean, as we all know, growing up in New England, having north light in the summer is great because you can see outside and you're not boiling hot. And having south light in the winter is fantastic because you can sit out and you can kind of catch the rays and so from our sort of understanding and analysis, turning it all south is actually not as responsive to the environmental conditions. So that's sort of why we began to orient in that direction, right? And the double-sided units. So that's kind of how we ended up there in the design process.
Thank you. Those are my two questions.
Mr. Engel?
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to like about your design. I have to say something nice. I do like the plazas. I do like the affordability element.
Where's the bot? Oh no, where's the bot? Sorry.
But I share Dan Radman's concerns with respect to height. And so that's going to be important to me in evaluating this. I really share John Chris's concerns with the workspace. And I will say that when you called Burtis Avenue a marginal retail zone, I thought to myself, wait a minute, because it's marginal and we're going to get rid of the retail because we don't want to add any retail to the empty storefronts in New Canaan. I said, I don't share your assumption at all. I think Burtis Avenue plays a very important role in the health of our downtown. Not everybody can afford to be on Elm Street or Main Street. I think it's got an important mix of shops that can't afford to be or choose to be on Burtis Avenue. And I'd like to not write off Burtis Avenue as a retail zone. I think it's going to be very important that, that sidewalk continue to support people who are coming down into those businesses, and to call those Zoom rooms is really, I think, writing off and saying that we've decided that this is no longer retail. It's no longer the kind of zone for which we're going to invite traffic. And therefore, anybody who moves into the stores across the street is going to say, yeah, we've limited the amount of foot traffic down here. And I think that's the wrong direction. So I remain unconvinced on the value of live work and tying those quasi retail structures into the houses above them. I remain unconvinced. The last concern, it wasn't addressed, I don't think, by anybody else, was the east facing facade. I've gone through the town website, had your application on it, and I don't see, and it's not the same one that you presented tonight. So I've been going through it looking for what the east facade looks like, the one that Swirl is facing and Compass Real Estate is facing. And I think that it looks like a rather like a wall with some staircases in it, but I can't quite tell because there is no elevation included in the posted file. Can you address what that's going to look like from the businesses across the street?
For sure. We actually, and I apologize, it was the last elevation, like we're obviously working through and we're preliminary at this moment. We feel like, and I agree with you, activity along that facade is super important. So what we're putting there, I don't know, Jen, if you can pull up we'll pull up the elevation. I apologize, it wasn't in the posting. I think, from what we're showing here, and so what you're seeing are sort of the side of the townhomes. And then at the end of sort of the Burtis Street 2125, this is where the amenities are. And so what we're hoping is, you're gonna have a gym in that area, you'll have sort of the amenities of the overall space. The hope again with the amenities is that you go outside and you actually walk along Cherry Street, because there isn't a lot of pedestrian traffic down there right now because there's a giant stone wall that exists there. And so the idea is to try and begin to bring some life through these windows and these pierces on the sort of, and that facade would be, unlike the sort of stone, would be more wood, a little softer, a lot of glass, and hopefully what we're bringing there is a lot of activity that isn't there now to that sort of facade. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And obviously the plaza above, hopefully by being 2 floors and a little bit up from across the Compass real estate across the way, and there's the pub on the other side, that we're trying to bring people down to that area over there. So that's our hope. We feel like even though it is sort of building amenity, that it is the sort of retail building amenity component of the site. So that's kind of what you're looking at here. And if, Jen, can you go over and show sort of I don't know if you can, right. So the idea is sort of a screened wood, a softer feel along that facade. And then obviously penetrations, but also windows behind it in a sort of screened, interesting sort of wood manner. That's sort of what we're looking at there.
Is it fair to say that this is a gym, not a retail, and along Burtis Avenue, their live work spaces, that those decisions were dictated by parking, by deficiencies in parking, and that's why we have live workspaces, and that's why there's a gym, because otherwise, if they were legitimate retail mixed use environment in the old sense, then we would be underparked?
That isn't how we arrived here. I don't want to obviously belabor a point, but that's not how we arrived here. I think and if you look at our experience, I actually think live work in this construct is something that could actually bring folks to the street down here. And I think in terms of amenity down there, if that right there were to become retail, I think we would figure a way to make that retail. Again, we're proposing a design. We're not incrementalizing a design. And so we're not trying to skirt the underlying regulations. We're actually trying to work within them and trying to bring something that we think could be a really great addition to the pedestrian environment to downtown. Currently there now is as I said, a stone wall, another stone wall, 4 curb cuts, and probably 20 parking spaces at grade. So there's no retail there now. We're trying to bring something different, and we love the comments because we've racked our brain on this. The offices came well before any of the parking. So I just want to not say that the idea is parking first and offices second. It's actually offices first. And if we didn't have enough parking, we would go somewhere else. So, in terms of like how do we make this work? This is literally a design process. And what we're really trying to do here is bring something interesting and different. And when we talk about Zoom rooms, I don't think it's Zoom rooms, like they'll have Zoom capacity there, but it's literally, if you took a home office that everyone's using right now and put it down on the street, that's really the idea. So rather than going into your back bedroom as your home office, you actually go out on the street, bring some life along Burtis, where right now and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I sit, and we own that parcel now, and I watch the number of pedestrians walking down. Very, very few. I think I was one of the only pedestrians who walked down that street. It's very car centric. It's very about, you know, a sort of bypass from Maine down to Cherry. No one's walking there. We're hoping to bring pedestrians here and perhaps change the face of what Burtis can be, to be, and not different, but more supportive of pedestrian level retail. That's really like what this is about, and trying to bring people to the street and making an effort to do that. You know, again, if we said, okay, let's make some of it retail, you know, we'll figure out a way to make it retail. I think from our understanding of the economics of downtown and looking at what retail offerings there are great, amazing retail opportunities in downtown. And that's not to say that every characteristic doesn't need to exist in a downtown. We just feel like this could be like a different kind of way of engaging Burtis and making it a place where you see people on the street, and the retailers across the street, hopefully coffee shops and beauty salons and all of the things of having people living downtown, that the retailers across the street benefit from that as well. Where if all the retail is in our development, none of these folks are going out to the retail in the neighborhood. So again, we're very open to ideas and different ways of thinking. We've struggled with it, but I definitely don't want you to think we went parking first and what fits in after. That isn't the intent. And the scale of the offices are actually very intentional, so they don't become a place where people are having, you know, 10-person meetings. It's the idea that someone who lives here actually comes out of their house and works here. And that perhaps if they need to go for a meeting, they're walking up along Elm, getting on the Metro North and going out to New York and doing a meeting there, or finding another shared conference room to sort of have a larger scale meeting. So we don't want it to be a place where everyone's coming to meeting. That isn't the intent. So
I think you were right to say that 21 Forest is a model for what we're looking to do here. I think 21 Forest is very successful, both as the residents and the retail below it. And Forest Street generally is very successful for us as part of our pedestrian friendly downtown. I would also look to not the view as a model for what you should be looking at, you know, for density, room factor, and material controversy, but I would look to the small retail spaces across from the front door of the library. I think if you had come 10 years ago, you might have said some of the same things about that area, but that area has been renovated and lots of small businesses have taken those small places, and it's become a very important, you know, part. It's not the most highly trafficked sidewalk and highly trafficked, but it's an important part of the mix. And I think Burtis is going to be an important part of the mix. And that's why I don't like it when you call it marginal retail.
Oh, so, and I apologize if it was, I apologize if the word choice was off by all measures. When I say marginal, I think, and I'm not talking about Burtis as a whole, I'm talking about our side of Burtis for sure. So, because our side of Burtis actually is really not working today for anyone, quite frankly. And so we definitely want to do what we can to improve that. And so that's what we're trying to do. So.
Hey, commissioners,
May I add to that response too? Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Mr. Engel, for that question. When we talk also about backing into things, I didn't discuss what really an as of right business A zone application could look like, and that calls for actually it's quite a bit of density, and there are 750 square foot max unit sizes there. That's the goal under the as of right development schedule. So we'll be looking for 1-bedroom units at 750 square feet, which could produce on this site, assuming again that it could be parked, around 50 up to 54 units, which I don't know if that's necessarily the goal here either, that perhaps it is that that regulation was designed to place units in on smaller properties or within smaller developments, but taking the approach using some of the special permit tools that are available, be it under the affordability component or under the sister regulation of retail B, seems much more appropriate and in scale. So part of the approach I think that the applicant took in designing this over the last several months and thinking through the concept plans was trying to determine if in fact the as of right development scheme or opportunities were really appropriate, because that would produce a different type of density and proposal.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners, any last comments? Mr. Adams?
Yes, a couple more. I share Mr. Engel's and Mr. Chris's concerns on the live work solution. So my question on that is quite simple. What happens when it fails? You have 8 units down there, part of the live work combination, and you're going to need a unique buyer that's going to be willing to pay a premium to have an adjacent Zoom room on the ground floor of his building or his or her building. What happens when they don't use them, or you don't have buyers for those particular units? Because they're not directly connected, right? So they're going to be deed connected to other units in the complex. What's going to become of that space? Does it then switch to retail? Because quite frankly, I know we're all talking about how the world's changed because of COVID, and there's a whole new Zoom world and live work at home. But the reality of it is we're now faced with 2 types of work environments, right? Either we're going back to the traditional leaving the house to go to an office somewhere. And for some people, the benefit of that is that you are leaving the house. You're getting away from home and going to an office somewhere and separating yourself. And then there's the other new work culture that is the Zoom rooms at home and setting up their home offices. But again, the benefit and the attraction of that is that you're not leaving your home. You're not leaving your apartment. You have a dedicated room in the house. So this is kind of trying to bridge the gap between those two, but I'm not entirely convinced it's going to be successful in doing that. Has it been done elsewhere? Have the architects used this solution in a project where that type of live work split in the same building has worked?
They have, yes. Then Phil, if you'd like to speak to that.
I mean, I think, again, I appreciate that we're at seven live work units. I think we're trying to 8. Okay. And I think we're trying to understand how best to make this happen without being fully, you're saying there are 26 live work units. It's 8. And I think, again, and I'll get back to where we've done it before, because we've done it before. Not everyone is going to like everything. And so I agree with you, in a marketplace where we're putting 26 units in, if 8 units, basically, we're looking for 8 people who would like their home office, which is a typical sort of construct in our world, would like to actually be on the street rather than staring at a white wall in a small room off of their kitchen would prefer to be at a street lit, sort of store-fronted kind of space where they feel like they're part of the community. That's sort of the feel we're going for. And so, you know, a lot of, in the other units, we actually have home offices up in the units, right? So there's an offering for everyone here. We're not trying to say everyone is going to want one of these units. We've done this before. We've actually done an extensive research study for New York City EDC around how to make this happen in New York City. And I know that sounds crazy around New York City, but we've done this in Amenity, New York, particularly around work and live above. All of our older cities were about work below, shop below, live above. It's not to say it's for everyone. And I don't think we're saying it's for everyone. Every unit isn't going to be down there, but it's a proven model that's been done in the past. And so, you know, it's something we feel like, particularly at this time where folks are having to spend 2 days or can spend 2 days at home and have this flexible work model, and then go to the office on the Metro North train system is something that can work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you're using, other than Marinick, you're using examples of urban environments where you've implemented this solution and it's possibly worked. But again, I come back to the question, what happens when it fails, right? You've got 26 units. You as one of the partners in the project, as well as the architect, you've sold off 26 units and only 3 of them wanted the workspace, the live workspace at the ground level. What do you do with the other 5? Because you're not going to not sell a unit for a premium to a buyer who's in a 3-bedroom on the 4th floor of this unit, who says, I'll take it, but I don't want that ground floor space. No reasonable developer, real estate broker is going to turn that person away. They're going to find a way to make that deal work. So there's going to be vacant space. There just is. What happens to it?
So I think, and sort of in that mindset, none of the 3 bedrooms actually have office space down below. Just so we're all clear, the 3 bedrooms actually aren't.
I was just using that example. It doesn't matter how many bedrooms.
Yeah. But I think actually from a demographic standpoint, it actually does. Because if you're in a 2-bedroom, I think that of a smaller scale, you're more than likely grateful or happy to have that extra space to use as either if you're a single mom or single dad, or, you have a kid. And I just think we're not assigning it to the biggest units. We're actually assigning the 7 to the smallest units, sort of as a way for them to, as a sort of relief valve for the constraints of our more modern sort of considerations of COVID. And so, we're doing everything we can in the design to make it integral to the living sort of environment. And in that, like, if we were to say, okay, it's all retail and the retail isn't leased, what happens then, right? It's just empty retail. And so we feel like this is sort of a captured marketplace where we can say, hey guys, your apartment or your residence may feel not expansive, but you know what? You have this sort of office space down here that you can work from. And so that sort of notion of how it works, as opposed to simply saying it's retail. And then when I look along Main and seeing empty retail, to me, I think it's sort of a way to get life on the street, which, from my experience, the goal set of towns isn't about what's on the street. It's about having people on the street and generating revenue on the street and being about making a place for citizens and communities. And the reality is that if everybody's holed up in their apartments with home offices, no one's on the street. And so that's sort of the intent of it. I don't want to I don't want to say, everybody's going to use those offices all the time, but I feel like if it's retail, there's no guarantee that we're going to lease out that retail all the time either. So, it kind of works both ways. So we feel like.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we should move on at this point. Ms. Kaufman, unless you have something urgently.
I just wanted to say that's a good question to ask. We'll work on that response, and perhaps something that we can do, Mr. Redmond, is think through two scenarios and alternative as we begin to refine this plan and think of both what is desired by the applicant to explore with you as the commission, and then also consider a contingency plan, and if it's possible to take a two-pronged approach to an application or not. But I have some ideas based on the questions you've asked, and I appreciate that because it gives us some additional things to discuss.
Okay, and just at my end, the one thing I will say is I think we should be considering alternatives to just additional mixed use retail, because I do worry, and I know other retailers in town worry, is are we going to keep creating more and more retail? Ms. Kaufman, just quickly for you, don't answer it now. Or any of those buildings, those two houses, historical? Second thing is, I really did not understand, and maybe your point is because it's in the process of development, but exactly what your text amendments would be. Third, as one commissioner, I wouldn't be wild about separating the text amendments from the actual project. And commissioners strongly suggest that, please give additional feedback to Lynn that she can then funnel back to the team. And then,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Sorry, could I just add one more observation and just guidance for the applicant? In New Canaan, and everyone on the commission, as well as most of the people in the audience, we're very sensitive to trying to keep a New England feel and something, doing developments in town that are more contextual to the vocabulary of what already exists in town, in terms of a blend between mid-century modern and the traditional New England. Other commissioners have brought up 21 Forest as a really good example. I agree. I think the scale and the setbacks and the massing of that one is a very successful solution. What I'm having a hard time with this application is, while yes, we're talking about simple materials, things like limestone panels on the facade of a building, and having looked through this application, there is nothing that jumps out at me to make me think this is in New Canaan. Having seen these drawings, I look forward to the renderings and seeing what you do there. But this screams DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. It doesn't scream New Canaan. It just seems out of context. And I would just implore you to take a look back at how the downtown architecture is massed and assembled and composed, so that we don't create walls of development. I'm all for development on the site, but to all the other commissioners' observations, the massing and the height of this are just a little overpowering. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, team. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate all the
Thank you all
comments.
so much for your time, and we will follow up with Lynn, and we welcome any additional comments or questions that you have to guide our next steps. I have never come back to you, Mr. Goodwin, and to the commission with a second pre-application, but I will consult with Philip to see if that's something that he's interested in. But is that something that is continued to be available to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an incredibly important site. Everybody will agree on that. So commissioners, unless you feel strongly no, my inclination would be yes. Let's try to get this figured out, up front. So I agree. And I see.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I see the first selectman is back on, so why don't we, I'm jumping all over the agenda tonight, my apologies, but let's go to the Homeland proposal. So 8C, proposal by Homeland Towers LLC, Homeland Towers and New Canaan Singular Wireless PCS LLC, AT&T for development of a public safety wireless telecommunications tower facility located 1837 Ponus Ridge Road in the town of New Canaan. I was on it. Mr. Chris was on it. I think Mr. Radman, you were on it. I don't know if other commissioners were on it. Well, maybe I'll kick it off, and Mr. Chris, Mr. Radman, anybody else who was on the Zoom, gosh, it was last night, wasn't it? 2 nights.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
It's Commissioner John Chris here. I think when you spoke, Mr. Chairman, you talked about the zoning regulations that this commission put together regarding communications towers, and really commending those to the attention of the Siting Council. And I agree with that. I think those are things that we should certainly emphasize to the Siting Council, and the recommendation that they do all they can to follow them. Though ultimately, I would say to the public, especially many of the neighbors who spoke, is that the Connecticut Siting Council has sole jurisdiction in this case, and that is all centralized out of Hartford. Local zoning commissions need to be consulted, and the Siting Council needs to examine any local zoning rules regarding cell towers, but ultimately it's their call on things. So it's been taken out of our hands. So if people have issues, they need to talk to Hartford about them rather than us. But anyway, that ship has sailed. The public safety issues struck me as very strong. Several public safety people spoke and talked about some of the communications problems they have, which can literally be life and limb issues for them, as well as for residents and visitors to our town. And those are things I think, I think out, and I would think all commissioners certainly want to address. If you meet anyone in town and ask them, do you want bad cell service? They say no, but the issue is, well, where do you want to put the cell tower? Which is the question, as opposed to the desire for cell service. I would also note that if the Siting Council in its wisdom decides to proceed with this, there are any number of things that can be done to try to soften the impact of the installation without in any way, shape, or form diminishing its functionality. And this would be using a high quality, let's say, wooden fence around the ground installation, having a well-designed building that is consistent with the town, something more barn-like, which we've seen in other installations, with high quality materials, high quality landscaping of local plants, trying to disguise the pole as best as possible. Those are pretty easy things to do to try to ameliorate the impact. And those are ones that I would hope this commission would want to emphasize to the Siting Council. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Other commissioners, Mr. Admin, anybody else?
I would agree with everything Mr. Chris said, specifically on the structure, housing the equipment corral down at the bottom of the tower. Something that Homeland Towers always seems to not include in their application. They just put a fence around it and put a few bushes around it and call it a day. Whereas our regulations are very clear and specific that we're looking for a structure, something similar to a barn or shed elsewhere in town to enclose the equipment, which is possible, and make it look more, less obtrusive and more like a piece of, a barn or structure on the property rather than an equipment corral. And I do share the residents' concerns on the health impacts, but I'm kind of torn on that subject because there are so many studies over the years that we've been talking about this, that I've read and that I've seen, that go both ways. Some that criticize the health impacts, others substantiate the lack of any health implications. I guess it all depends on which report you read.
Okay, anybody else? One comment I'll make is, as Mr. Chris referred, and it was fairly late in the process, but I did send an email on Sunday, which the applicant saw, and I did subsequently ask the applicant to comment on our regulations, and the applicant, I wish had sort of reviewed the regulations, and the applicant is aware of the regulations because we had the same regulations for Soundview. Now, that said, I think, look, I think the technology they're using is basically baked in. It's going to be the technology they use. So I think what I'm hearing from commissioners is, as we've done in the past, is we can submit a letter to this Connecticut Siting Council pointing out, what we think is important for them to evaluate. And I agree with Mr. Chris and Mr. Radman that I think perhaps the right thing to do is a better addressing of the base structure. Mr. Moynihan, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just emphasize, John, you can give comments directly to Homeland. Homeland has the obligation to explain to the Connecticut Siting Council how the local P&Z rules work. And so I think I wouldn't wait for the Connecticut Siting Council process. I'd give comments to Homeland, and they may change their design before they get to the Connecticut Siting Council.
Okay, that's very helpful input. Thank you. Lynn, maybe what I would suggest is, Lynn, you've done this before in the prior on the Soundview situation. And so we work on that and we submit comments to Homeland and ask them to come back to us with responses. Does that sound good to everybody?
No, actually, if I could request, I'd like comments to go to both. I'd like them to go to Homeland and see if they respond. And then I'd like the comments to also go to the Siting Council like they did for the Soundview application. We submitted comments on the enclosure and structure for the Soundview application, and Homeland ignored those. So they did not do any kind of structure there. There's only screening, fencing, and some shrubs. So okay. It didn't go very far on Soundview. I'd rather it go to the Siting Council.
So we'll go both routes.
Both.
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
John, I would also mention, obviously, we have Silver Hill Hospital, which was done years ago, happened to be done by Ray Vergati as well. There's we have a structure with the Waveney water tank antennas where P&Z did require that may have been pre-Siting Council actually, a structure, but the carriers, and by the way, in the case of the Country Club Tower, there's no structure at all because the Country Club lease didn't permit a structure. So, this is a combination of in the case of Soundview, the landlord required a number of things. But I think we should take the opportunity to give comments both to Homeland and then to the Siting Council. They will have a public hearing, possibly physically in Canaan as they traditionally did. But I think, keep in mind the location. Stuart Salvini searched around for a location for public safety for years and years. And so we've searched that neighborhood in the northwest corner. When we applied for a public safety only antenna on Aquarium Reservoir property, and it was turned down because on the Stamford side of the line, it get no benefit whatsoever to Stamford. That's why the P&Z Commission over there turned it down, or they effectively caused us to withdraw the application. We need a public safety location over there, and we need cell service there. Cell service for residents in emergencies is as important as public safety radios for our first responders. So, and I think what was interesting to me last night that the view shed, they said was like 97%. You mainly can view it from the reservoir. That was a very, very high percentage of not being able to see the tower. You're always going to have 1 or 2 or 3 residents who are going to be close to it, just like they are at Silver Hill Hospital. And initially, the residents around Silver Hill Hospital opposed that tower. No one really has a problem with that tower today. And also that tower is I think Keith Simpson lives about 50 feet from that tower up the hill. We need cell towers, and we did everything we could to try to find a location that's as discreet as possible. And the tree itself is very discreet given the topography and blending in with other trees there.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't think you're getting pushback from us on, you know, the importance and the location. So,
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest in this letter that you will be sending to the setting council, to the applicant, you may want to strongly suggest that when a hearing is held, it would be a hybrid meeting, which include an in-person facility, as well as holding that in New Canaan as opposed to somewhere else. I think it would be very good for the community to ensure that it's held here and to try to urge them to do so as opposed to elsewhere.
yeah, as I understand it, Kevin, you can jump in. As I understand it, that's, you know, that's COVID rules right now, and that's what
I think that'll be over by the time this, you know, they'll probably won't have a hearing until June.
so therefore.
Yeah, I think they will go back to in-person meetings.
Okay, great. Okay, super. Thank you. Jumping around again, Lynn, let's go to the fees memo.
Okay, as we just started our budget process, and as part of the budget process, we were asked to look at all the fees that each department has. Our current fee schedule doesn't meet with the recent legislation that was passed by Public Act 2129, which stipulates that you can't charge a separate fee that's different for multifamily than you treat single family residential. So we went back and analyzed our current fee schedule, and we noted that on our fee schedule, we currently charge by the size of the project for both non-residential, essentially commercial uses, and for additions. So we adjusted our current schedule so that we would charge on the residential side by the size of the project as well, instead of whether it was a single family or a multifamily. And so if you build a small 3,000 square foot single family house, or you build a small 3,000 multifamily house, you would pay the same price. But if you build a larger, 6,000 square foot single family house, you would pay more than you would for a 3,000 square foot single family house. So it would match with the rest of our fee schedule, which we charge by size.
Okay, so that's your recommendation, Lynn.
That is, it went, we were before the Board of Selectmen this morning, but ultimately you guys need to opine on the fee schedule, whether you would agree with it, and ultimately at the end of the budget cycle, if the Board of Selectmen would approve it.
Okay, commissioners, any questions? My guess is we're comfortable with your analysis, your recommendation, and the feedback on what we can and can't do, right? Lynn, do we need to take a vote?
I would be appreciative if you would vote.
Sure. Okay, can I have somebody make the motion to approve or deny the proposed fees menu?
Yes, this is Commissioner Cassavant. I will move that we approve the proposed fee schedule as presented to the committee.
I second.
Okay, great. I call the motion. John Goodwin, I vote yes. John Chris,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Ken Turner.
Yes.
I see that Mr. Ward has joined us, so I'll take Mr. Ward's vote.
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Cassavant.
Yes.
Okay, it carries. Okay, now backing up, like going out, item number 7, planning subcommittee update. So as you know, Krista Nielsen is the chair of the planning subcommittee, and what we thought we would do is we thought it would be good. It is a subcommittee. And Lynn, I actually would perhaps like you or Krista remind us who are the members of the subcommittee. But we thought it'd be good is to have a discussion among the entire commission. Now, as you know, the subcommittee is a critical vehicle because we do our regular meetings and we have to address applications. And then as we get later in the night, we're all exhausted. And so there doesn't get a heck of a lot of planning done. And, that was the thesis behind the subcommittee. I think it worked extremely well last year. We got a lot of great work done. And so I look forward to that continuing this year. So what I wanted to do was to turn it over to Krista and Krista give us some thoughts on, what are some of the issues, and you've been talking to Lynn as well. So, Lynn, you jump in as well, but give us some thoughts on, what should be some of the key objectives for the subcommittee this year. And then commissioners love to hear your feedback. But before we do that, Krista or Lynn, can you remind us who are the members of the subcommittee?
So I can let you know who the members are, but we probably should update the list because the newer members are not actually assigned as members to the subcommittee because they weren't on it when the subcommittee was formed. But the members that we have are John Kriz, Dan Radman, Claire Tiscornia, Kent Turner, Dick Ward, Kristen Nielsen, and John Goodwin.
Okay, well, I'm not a member. I attend all the meetings, but I'm not a member.
Okay.
But okay, great. So before I let Krista start, if there's anybody who's currently a member who, for whatever reason you wish not to be a member, please let Lynn and Krista know. And then if anybody, and to Lynn's point about the alternates, anybody who cares to join the subcommittee, the more the merrier. It's a hugely critical vehicle. So Krista, your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So John summarized what we wanted to do this meeting this evening, and it's a little later than I thought it was going to be, so I don't know how long and robust our conversation will be. But to give you a little bit of background, since we do have a lot of new members, and I hope new members will consider getting on this committee, we've been working as a subcommittee since 2019. And at that time, we put together a list of issues, both things in our zoning ordinance and planning related issues that we thought needed to be addressed. And we've attempted to slowly chip away at that for the last couple of years. Obviously, we've had some interruptions with COVID. We've also had some interruptions or perhaps distractions with what was going on at the state last year with enabling legislation that the state was working on. So tonight, what I wanted to do was just give you a quick recap of what we have done. Some of it, is completely done. Some of it is, actually most of it has things left to be done. And then really talk about where we want to go in 2022. I am going to attempt to share a slide. Okay. If you can believe it, in 2022, this is the first time I've actually ever shared slides. So I'm feeling really proud of myself right now. So anyway, the things that we have worked on so far, we've reviewed the definitions in the zoning ordinance and talked about those that are confusing, outdated, or completely missing. We've also reviewed the zoning map history of our town and looked at potential areas of conflict. Usually those are places where districts converge, perhaps a lot of them in a small area. And so you have different development standards, different uses coming together, and that creates a potential for conflict. We also had one meeting where we talked about senior housing styles that exist and whether any of those might be appropriate in New Canaan. We did spend some time last year talking about the legislation that the Desegregate Connecticut Coalition was working on and what that might mean for New Canaan and what things we could do to get ahead of that. We had a meeting where we discussed the B residence zone, how it allows 2 single-family homes currently on 1 lot. And the sense was that we would probably want to eliminate that loophole and potentially create some residential infill design guidelines for the in-town neighborhoods. And then for those of you that are more new, probably what you're most familiar with is that we spent basically all of 2021 working on some inclusionary zoning regulations to augment section 7.6, which is what was alluded to in the earlier presentation for Burtis Avenue. So in terms of where we go in 2022, so I put this into 2 boxes. One is things that we have to do, and then the other is sort of like the wish list of things we want to do. And Lynn, obviously jump in on any of this, but we have to do 830J affordable housing plan. This is required by state statute and is something that I know Lynn has in her mind that we are working on. Right now, we are partnering with Westcog. Westcog is doing a regional affordable housing plan. And so the town of New Canaan will plug into that and then sort of spur off and do what else, the additional work that we feel we need to do just for New Canaan. So, you know, that could be as big or as little as we want it to be. I think that with the inclusionary zoning regulations, we got, you know, a big lift. We got some work done, but I think there's a lot more that we can do in terms of workforce housing and just other aspects of affordable housing. So that is on the list of things that will have to be addressed, and I'm sure will come before the subcommittee from time to time. We also have some zoning text amendments that are required by Public Act 2129, which is what the Desegregate Connecticut platform sort of turned into when it got approved. And those are residential parking requirements. We have to revise our current parking requirements for residential uses in our zoning ordinance because they don't meet the standards set by 2129. We also will have to make some revisions to our ADU regulations because what is required by 2129 is also slightly different than what we have. Again, with both of those, we could just do the bare minimum, check the box, get it done. There may be more things that this commission or the subcommittee feels are necessary to discuss with regards to parking or ADUs, and I'm open to that as well. And then the third one is not something we have to complete in 2022, but it's just something I think we should keep in the back of our mind, which is that we're coming up on a POCD update in 2024. So I think a smart thing to do would to keep in mind as we move forward in other conversations, you know, how can we plug those conversations into the future POCD update so that we're not doing the work twice or overlooking things that we could do. So then on the right side, things that we may want to address. These are things that are still sort of outstanding on the list that we composed back in 2019. And this, you know, at number 8 is a bunch of question marks. So I'm not going to pretend this is a complete list. Obviously, we can add to it, we can revise it. But what I wanted to get a feel for tonight was, you know, where people's interests and priorities lie on the right side, because obviously some of our bandwidth is going to be taken up with the left side. So we will only have so much time and resources to put into the right side. So the things that are still on that side are senior housing, doing something either code changes or policy wise with sustainability and the environment, working on the in-town residential infill design guidelines that were previously discussed with regard to the B residential zoning district. You know, I always bring up my issues with how we do text amendments. So that's number 4 on the list. I'm happy to elaborate on that. Always on the list is institutional uses in residential zones. We talked a bit tonight, and I think there's obviously always more conversations to be had for how we can change our zoning to support the downtown retail and office environment. And then we had a number of specific code changes that, you know, we could focus on as well in terms of getting rid of the 2 single family homes on one lot and B residence zones, figuring out how to kind of fix some regulations that don't necessarily jive right now with our own design regulations in 6.12 and also the village district design guidelines. Section 7.1, I believe, is non-conforming uses. There's some things that need to be tweaked there. And I think section 6.3 was signs and sandwich boards, which has also been on the list since the very beginning. So, you know, that's what I have for you. So I'd really like your guys' feedback on which of these you think is our priorities for 2022. Again, recognizing that we can't do it all. And also if we've forgotten anything, if there's new issues that we need to add to this list. So with that, I'll open it up for comments and questions.
That's John Kriz. I think on the things we must address, certainly if Hartford says we have to do it, we got to do it. So that sort of goes to the head of the list. As far as POCD, those tend to be time consuming. And so my sense is if delivery has to be in sometime in 2024, you'd have at least a 1-year gestation period to do that. And so probably kick off at the end of 2023 2022 this year. Most of the heavy lifting gets done in 2023, and we tie a bow on it in early 2024. It'd be my sense of timing for that. On sustainability, I got a couple items. We heard today about geothermal. For folks who don't know, geothermal requires hydraulic fracturing or fracking. So imagine fracking occurring in downtown New Canaan. I have to believe there's going to be a reaction from the public on something like that. And so we may want to come up with some specific rules regarding geothermal installations. Also regarding wind power, another sustainability issue. There are a few residential wind turbines up that sort of fall under some rule somewhere. We may want to think about coming up with something that's specific for wind power so that it's not only consistent with what we think is right for the town, but also we can make it as much as a right thing as possible. So they just fill in the forms and they go ahead and do it, as opposed to go through a lot of administrative activities with us or someone else. Also on landscaping and plants, a few items that Newtown near us recently changed some of their zoning, and they banned invasive plants from being planted on town properties. The Connecticut maintains a list of invasive plants, and essentially you can't plant them. Also, they require native plants on town property and for commercial properties. It was recently expanded to commercial properties. It varies on exactly how much has to be native, such as 100% for trees and grasses and 85% for shrubs and some others. But they have passed some rules on this. We do talk about this in our plan of conservation development and our zoning rules, but the language is a bit on the mushy side, in my opinion. And so tightening that up may be useful. And again, this is something that doesn't really cost you anything. You know, and sort of instead of planting this tree, you plant that tree. And from a livability perspective and environmental perspective, this generates benefits for everyone, since we all live in a natural environment. And so I see this as sort of a good and easy and pretty low cost environmental win. Also, we may want to revisit solar on commercial and whether this is something we want to encourage in some way. And it was mentioned, Krista, that you want some things on the zoning map. If you look at the zoning map, there's some odd parcels that probably don't make sense anymore. Like, for example, the corner of Park and Cherry, where way back in the day, this is on the southeast corner, back in the day, there was an old house that turned into a bed and breakfast that has long since been torn down and is now part of the St. Aloysius parking lot. But that little corner is still in the business A zone. The rest of the parking lot and the church is in the residential zone. So there's some odd parcels here that we may want to think about tidying up at some point. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Krista, this is Art, Commissioner Cassavant. I just had a question and then a suggestion. I believe that the accessory dwelling unit requirement is a lot like the cannabis rule, that we are allowed to accept or reject. And, you know, I'm not sure, maybe you encompass that in your item sub B here, but I believe that that warrants a significant public discussion. And then I would like to suggest that we need to create a communication stream separate from that which is coordinated by WestCog, but one that would be opened directly with comparable communities throughout the state, so that we're well informed about where we stand on 830G. In anticipation of this meeting, I did try to find an 830G or J inventory for the state. It's at least 2 years old. And it dawns on me that our work might be well informed by having a more active communication between planning and zoning committees in other communities. I'm not sure if that's really within the subcommittee's purview, but I think we might benefit from that. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. To answer your first, or to respond to your first comment on the ADU requirements. So yes, both the residential parking requirements and the ADU requirements have an opt-in or opt-out provision the way we did with the cannabis regulations that were also passed last year. My inclination, and Lynn, you tell me if you feel differently, is based on what I see Public Act 2129 requiring. I don't think we're going to opt out. I think that, you know, these are things that are doable for us, and frankly, at least with the ADUs, are not too far off from what we already have. So it's more a matter of tweaking than it is of, you know, really creating a whole bunch of new stuff. So, you know, Lynn, I think we could probably do the zoning text amendments, you know, get those together and bring them rather quickly if that's what we put our mind to get done. Would you agree?
Yes. Yes, agreed. And well stated. It is correct. Our current ADU rules in the zoning regulations are very similar to what they envision, and so it's really a tweaking of ours to match what the state has, and we can edit it further if the commission wishes.
Okay. Anyone else?
A couple of thoughts from me. One is, and to Art's point, and Krista knows this, is WestCog, in my experience, is becoming much more effective and useful than they have in past years. You know, I've been sitting on this commission since about, I guess, 05, and I knew they existed, but there wasn't much of a discussion. There wasn't much help. That has changed. So that's going to be a wonderful tool. And they, you know, I have a big deck next to me right now, which is where they have a draft, which will help feed into helping us put together 830J, the concept, and Krista know it better than I, but the concept is you have something common across communities, and then we can tailor it specific to New Canaan. Second thought is item number 7. Lynn and I and Krista, we probably talked about this. Is I think a lot of that can be driven by Lynn and her office. You know, one of the things I think the subcommittee wants to think about is where can you be most effective? And I think Lynn can figure out, you know, what are the solutions to some of these challenges and the specific code changes. And then we just bring it to the commission and we tackle them as we go along. The last point I have is that senior housing and also workforce housing, you know, look, I think one of the things we can do as a commission is we can create a better toolbox to help achieve objectives within town. And you know, we'll see how inclusionary housing goes. We'll see whether we have to tweak it, but we created a toolbox. And I think you know, look, the reality is we were focused on senior housing, and then desegregate Connecticut came along, and no matter what your views are on it, we had to pivot. We had to address it. That's my opinion. And I think we should now pivot back to senior housing and frankly, workforce housing. And workforce housing, by the way, is addressed in some of the WestCog work. But that would be something that I would recommend is let's work on creating a toolbox which can then help, you know, developing more senior housing within town and also workforce housing.
Okay. Points well taken.
I think one other thing we might want to put on the radar for the upcoming year is now that we've got the affordable housing statute out there for the town regulations, we're going to have multiple developers coming to us over the next few months with their applications for different projects. We all know that's coming down the pipeline. And as developers pick through, developers and their attorneys pick through the regulations, they're going to find loopholes and ways to get around or to maximize their development potential of the site. I guess that's the best way to put it. As we just heard on the Burtis Street application, they're going to be pushing the 50-foot limit on the height of these things, going to 5 stories. And I know they said it's only 4 stories. It's not, it's 5 stories. It's going to significantly impact the scale and context of our downtown area with those types and sizes of developments. You can just see what Merritt View did for Park Street, right? We may want to, and what we may want to do is put a relook at the regulation maybe later in the year when we see other things coming through or hear of other applications to understand where we might want to tighten the regulation up.
Yep, I think that's a fair point, and as you know, we said all the way through the process that we would have to go back at some point and see where we needed to work on it. But yeah, we got to get some test cases and then reevaluate.
Krista, hi, it's Kent Turner. I think another very important piece of zoning that we've kind of lost, the design guidelines, the downtown village guidelines. I think they need to be tied to the POCD. We've got to find a way to give the guidelines some teeth. They didn't prove to be overly effective as far as the library. And I think we need to really study that and see how we can not only add to it, but to really find a way to enforce and to make sure that the guidelines are being followed.
Okay. Anything else?
Hey, Krista, Chris Aaron here. The thing that guides my thoughts beyond the non-negotiables that you highlighted on the left are really our priorities for the 2024 POCD. It's not that far off. And in reading the POCD today, building on the comments earlier, it seems like there's a lot of areas that we've just we're in a position to mature a little on our point of view, I believe. I think the town has moved forward in a lot of those different areas, and I think senior housing is a bigger component today. The circulation that Tiger went over earlier today, we've kind of moved the ball so far forward. We've now, what was it, 70% of the goals of that were moved ahead. So I think we have to look at that POCD and look at how has the town moved forward and where are those gaps as far as the people that are moving in today, what are they looking for from the town? And I think that would, in my mind, drive towards the idea of mixed uses in senior housing and sustainable and really prioritizing downtown areas for development, because what we saw on Pine Street for that proposal, what we saw tonight with Cherry, we're seeing a lot of pressures in different places, and I feel like with a finer point, we could provide a lot more guidance. And so I guess I would lean towards the infill and the sustainability and the senior as the top three.
Okay, 1 through 3. All right, last thoughts?
I'd like to join.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably just, Lynn can hear you right now, but if anyone else wants to join, just email Lynn. And usually the meetings are an hour before the regular planning commission meeting. So and we don't have them necessarily every month, but if you let Lynn know that you want to join, she will let you know if we're having one that month.
And I already thought I was already on it, so I'll just add that back.
I think you became kind of a de facto member when we did the inclusionary zoning.
So I apologize to all the newer members. The list was the last time we formalized the list was back in early 2019. So if you weren't on the commission in early 2019, that's why you're not on the list. So that's just date wise.
Yeah, so everyone feel free to email Lynn and get on the list, because these are issues that affect pretty much all the applications that we end up talking about. So it's a good place to have the conversations if you have the time.
Okay, all set, Krista?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Dick Ward,
yeah, Dick.
wonder if I could make just a brief comment as I'm not sure how it would fit in our current discussion as to the zoning regulations. But with respect to the senior housing, I wonder if related to senior housing, we shouldn't be thinking a bit about how a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community fits within the regulations, or whether there's anything that we should consider to perhaps help a CCRC come to fruition in the town in New Canaan.
Yeah, I
mean,
think
we
that's
went-
definitely part of the senior housing conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we went through, as everyone knows, a long discussion when Waveney came forward with a proposal, but there was a lot of opposition, the size, the location. There were reasons why it just wasn't really getting off the mat. But it seems to me that that type of facility is something that I think would be very beneficial to the town.
Agreed.
Chairman Goodwin, is there a budget for bringing in speakers, or, Westcog obviously has a lot of resources, but, from an educational perspective, I don't know a lot about continuing care facilities. And so I was curious, what's the commission's
We
point of
don't, we don't have a budget per se. Mr. Herring, typically what we do is we utilize the budget from the planner's office. Do you have comments? Lynn?
You want about budget?
Yeah. So for example, to Mr. Herring's question, let's say we decided we wanted to engage a consultant to advise us on a certain aspect of the subcommittee planning process.
We typically can find the money to do it. If we know about it in advance, we can plan for it a year in advance. And as we gear up to the POCD, I put money in the budget for the POCD, so there's definitely money. If this current budget is approved, then there would definitely be money in that budget to look at hiring outside consultants to look at specific aspects headed towards the POCD.
And a good example of that, Chris, is for example, when we ended up redoing the telecommunications regulations, we hired Glenn Chowder, who's the person who typically works with us on the POCD process as well. And so we are able to do that. But to Lynn's point, we have to work with her office from a budget perspective.
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned Glenn Chowder. He may be a busy guy. I wonder if you want to stick a pin in his time and say, hey, we're going to give you a call. Otherwise, we call and sorry, I'm busy. Just a thought.
No, you're Mr. Chris, you are spot on. We are on it. And a lot of our discussion is, okay, how are we going to line up Glenn for X, Y, Z? So, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, John, can I make a comment?
Please.
I had a meeting yesterday afternoon with 6 or 7 or 8 people, 4 of them from Waveney Care Center, Scott Hobbs and others. And people ought to realize, Waveney Care Center is our hometown senior care facility. They need a CCRC as part of their model to survive economically. And so I think when you talk about expertise, Russ Barksdale and the Waveney team are experts. And we shouldn't look at them as strangers. They are an integral part of this community sitting on town property.
So they should be one of our expert advisors.
I think so. Again, I mean, we can't treat them as strangers. We need to care very deeply about their survival.
Yep.
In a competitive marketplace.
Yeah. No, I agree. Okay, anybody else? Okay, great. Thank you, Krista. Okay, one more item. Approval of the minutes, December 14, 2021, regular meeting. Do I have any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second. John
Okay,
Chris.
great. Okay, John Goodwin, I vote yes. John Chris,
Yes.
Krista Nielsen,
Yes.
Dan Radman,
Yes.
Claire Tiscornia,
Yes.
Ken Turner,
Yes.
Dick Ward,
Yes.
Arthur Cassavant,
Yes.
and Mr. Bash. I'll seat you for Mr. Engel since he was not a member of the commission. So Mr. Bash.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, everybody have a wonderful night. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.